Good afternoon, crafters, and welcome to P2PCrafts Presents, brought to you by From Picture to Page and Beyond Papercraft shows. I'm your host, Michelle Brown, Creative Director from Picture to Page, which is our scrapbooking, mixed media art and papercrafts community. Now, P2PCraft presents our talented retailers along with some guest artists, and we're coming right into your lounge room. So if you want to see who else we've got coming up, as well as catch some of the replays, head over to our website from picturetopageandbeyond.com.au, where you can see all of the replays, catch all of the links to the special offers and our socials for our guests, and of course see who's coming up. And while you're over there, make sure you're over on our email list so you can get summaries at the end of each week and also get exclusive news ahead of anywhere else. Now, whether you're watching live on Facebook, and I can see a whole heap of you joining there today, make sure you pop a hi in the comments. And also, of course, leave any questions because we can see you there. And of course, make sure you give us a like, and when we finish, share us with your crafty friends. Now today, P2PCraft presents Rachel from Darkroom Door. Hello, Rachel.
Hi.
It is so good to have you here. How are you going today?
I'm going pretty good. It's Saturday, so it's always nice on a weekend. So it's good to do some craft with everybody.
Excellent. And have you been keeping busy in these unusual times?
I have. I've been on on home. I was in hospital early in March, and so I had to stay home for a bit anyway. So it was kind of sort of strange anyway. But so I've been doing a little bit of craft and working a lot on the Darkroom Door website as well. So definitely keeping busy, that's for sure.
Yes, it's certainly been a good time to do all those behind the scene things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. So I'd love to know a little bit more about how does someone take their love of stamping and turn it into a whole business of designing your own stamps?
Oh, it's interesting, isn't it? But started out with photography, and I was mucking around in the dark room and created some photographs that I thought would work really well as stamps. And because I was already doing printmaking, so like with lino cuts and all that, and was rubber stamping a little bit, and but then thought that some of these photos would work really good as stamps. So I tried that out, and it did. And then I started designing more and more and more. And then I thought, we need to start our own business, I guess. So, and it was just the right time for us, like where we were in life as well. So, because I'd just finished, had been working corporate jobs and stuff with photography and doing photo shoots and things. And I just needed to stay home and build something up from scratch. And so that's how we started it.
Oh, excellent. And sort of, is there a lot of technology behind making stamps? I think it all seems so magical to us.
It kind of is, and it kind of isn't. It's sort of like from now, like we can use computers and all that sort of technology, like Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator and all those programs to actually make the stamp designs. But most of my designs come from the photographs. But then I do, bring that. I do need to make it into a digital file to then, send it off to have a plate made. So it's so once we do the digital file, then we get a master plate, like a magnesium plate done, and then it gets made into a matrix board, like a biscuit board, and then that's what we use as the mold. So the actual stamp making process is kind of old school. It's the same sort of technology that's been used for decades, basically. You just fine tune how you do the process. But the machinery itself, I mean, I know some stamp companies that have got machinery that is, sort of 70 years old, and it's still working perfectly to this day. So our machinery isn't that old. We started off with we bought 2 new stamp presses. So they're new. So they're only about, one's obviously 12 years old or 13 years old, because that's how old Darkroom Door is. And then we bought a second press probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. Okay. So, but they're the same. So, you just do tweaks to the machinery and, but yeah, so it's a bit of both, bit of new technology to get the design made, and then older technology to actually make the rubber.
Yeah, and it must be interesting sort of balancing that creative side and getting the new stamps up and running versus always, keeping everyone else supplied with all their favourites as well.
Well, that's it, yeah, because we don't discontinue our stamps. There's so everything that we've ever designed can still be purchased and still made available. And I mean, that's one of the benefits of us manufacturing. We manufacture here in Australia at our warehouse, just here on the Central Coast, New South Wales. And yeah, there's no reason for us to discontinue because we've still got the plates. So it does mean I was counting the other day. We've got 600 and something
Oh, wow.
stamp SKUs. So that's and some of them are sets. So there's like 200 sets which
Yeah.
have multiple stamps in the one case, and then there's all the singles. But yeah, so all up there's close to 650 or almost 700 designs. So
Wow.
there's quite a lot. So yeah, we keep them all going.
Yeah, and fantastic. It's just so it must be so good to sort of see how they've progressed over those years as well.
Oh, yeah, and some of the first stamps we ever released are still the best sellers because they're just what we like to do with our designs is make them classic, so that they're still as good to stamp with today as what they were when I designed them, 13 years ago. So,
Oh, excellent.
yeah.
Fantastic. And what stamping delights have you got for us today?
Well, today I'm going to show you some stenciling techniques, or one that I really like to use for backgrounds, and then I'll just show you some of the stamps on top of that, and some of our new stamps, and some of our older stamps as well. So that's what I like doing, just mixing it all together.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, while you get ready, I'll see who we've got here. So I can see Wendy, we've got Margaret, and hello to Kylie. Yeah, it's really good to have it. And we love this format because it gives us a chance to chat to the artists. We can also see some of their creations and we can ask any questions because sometimes it's those small details that really help us understand the process and then take it and get it to ourselves as well. So I can see Rachel is nearly ready. So I'll hand over to you. There you go,
Okay,
Rachel.
fabulous. I hope everybody can see that well enough on my table.
Yes, we
I
can.
was I was just trying to zoom in a little bit, but Skype doesn't seem to want me to do that. So
Yeah,
I'll
look,
just
let's
leave that
let's
as is.
not push the technology too far.
I know. I think we'll just leave it as is. It means that you can see everything that I'm doing anyway. So, okay, so let's give you some stuff to look at. So these are two cards that I just want to show you. I'll just bring on a bit of light here so you can see a bit. Okay, so this is a technique that I like to use with some stencils. So this is one of our stencils, and then using some of our foliage and flower stamps and some of our sentiment stamps. So these are just two cards using the same technique, but just using different stencils and different stamps. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. And another thing, I'm just going to be doing it on a card size, but then I will show you how it can be applied to an art journal page as well, because you can do all of these techniques whether it is on a card or you can also do it in an art journal. So it just depends on what size art journal you have as to what stencil size you'll use.
Ah,
So I've got,
excellent.
yeah, so it's, and because we have our stencils, some of our stencils are available in small and large. So you'll see here we've got, this is the diamond stencil. So it comes in a large size. It also comes in a small size. So if you're a card maker, you might just want to use the small size. If you're an art journaler, you might want to use the large size. But then you can also mix and match and, use both as well. I find the small ones really good for if you, with art journaling, if you just want to add a small bit of like texture paste through it and stuff, and you don't want the design so large, because when we do the large stencils, we have it as a larger version. Not only does that completely cover like a full art journal, let me grab an art journal here to show you. Like here's an art journal page, and these large stencils, they'll cover a complete page in one go. So that means you can spray all over it and you don't need to worry about, getting the edge of the stencil on your actual page. So, I like to have both sizes. So we're just going to use the small diamonds. But again, this technique works with any patterned stencil. And we're going to use some Distressed oxide sprays. So
Mm.
you can use any sprays for this. I'm just using Distressed Oxide. But if you've got dilutions or if you've got the Dina Wakley gloss sprays, any of those sprays will work fine. Sorry, I'm just trying to move these aside because I know once I start spraying, I'm sure you'll understand
Yes,
that
we'll all take a
that
step backwards.
yes, step back, people, step back. It's this is where things get real. Okay, so I'm just using this one here is cracked pistachio. Now the colors, it doesn't really matter what colors you use. I'm going to go, because this is a two-step process, I'm going to use the cool colors first and then I'm going to finish off with a warmer color. But you could just use green first and then use blue for the next step. It's just completely up to you. Okay, so first off, I just want a nice sort of, bluey, greeny wash, like a blend. So that's why I'm using two colors on the one stencil. I mean, there's 60-something distress colors, so the hardest part of this technique is choosing what colors you want to use. And all colors will go together. That's one thing I found about distress. I sat there one time, in my spare time, and I just sat there and just created a whole bunch of different blends with all the distress colors. And there really is, you can't get a bad blend, is basically what I'm trying to say. Okay, so you'll see there that I sprayed on some Distress Oxide spray and then I just spritzed on a little bit of water because I want this to be really quite wet. Now I'm just going to move this to the side here so you can see what I'm doing. And you want to lift up your stencil and then flip it over and press it onto your cardstock. I'm just going to get a little cloth here and I'm just going to press it on. So that stencil's just underneath. It's just going onto the cardstock. Now, the cardstock that I'm using is the Distress Mixed Media cardstock. And it's also the same cardstock that's in the Dilutions journal. So it takes these inks really, really well. Now, see here how you've got your nice little stenciled background. And because I use those two different colours, you've got that really nice blend between the cracked pistachio here and then going through to the broken china. And I only use two colours, but because they're blending in different variations throughout the whole stencil piece, you just get, different variations of blue and green together. Now, you've got all this beautiful ink here. You don't want to waste it. You could get little pieces of cardstock if you want. I'm going to get some crinkle ribbon or satin seam binding. Again, just mix that up with water. And then just run your seam binding through all the leftover ink. If you've got tags and things like that, you can always mop up any ink with the tags just to create some coloured backgrounds for your tags as well. So you don't want to be wasting ink if you've got it there sitting on your craft mat. Oh, and the mat that I'm using here is just a non-stick craft sheet. I use this, but I also use the Tim Holtz mat as well. But sometimes the mat, the Tim Holtz one, reflects too much when I'm doing videos, so that's when I'll pull these ones out. Okay, so you can see here how I'm mopping up all that ink, and then I haven't wasted anything of it. Okay, that's probably enough, but you guys get the drift of that. And then you've got this really nice ribbon here that you can use on any of your projects or on your cards.
Yeah, what a great idea. Then the colours are going to match as well.
Exactly. That's why you really only need one color ribbon. I mean, you actually need two. You need satin seam binding. Oops, sorry. You need white and you need twine. So that's really what I need. But if you saw my my ribbon stash, it's actually overflowing. I've got a drawer there full of ribbon and it's overflowing, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that regard. Okay, so there's just a few little wet bits still on this background here. You can get a heat gun and dry that off, but I don't want to make so much noise right now, so I'm just going to pat that dry onto here. And that's a really nice soft background. The other thing you need to do is clean your stencil. Again, I'm just going to wipe that clean. Now, the good thing about Distress Oxide and Dilutions and all those, they're all water-based, so they'll just wipe off your stencil, all the time. So you could actually leave it as long as you like and it'll still come back and wipe off. If you're using like the Dina Wakley gloss sprays, If you don't want it to stick to your stencil, then you need to wipe that off straight away. Otherwise, it will adhere and stick to your stencil. And the reason I know that is because I've done that. So, okay, so now I'm going to use a Distressed Oxide ink pad. Now, the reason I've switched from spray now to ink pad is because I don't want this to be necessarily very wet. I just want to get the colour and sponge it in, and then I know that wherever I sponge is the only place where it will go. And whereas if I used a spray, depending on how much spray I used, it could actually go underneath the stencil. Like, see here how this is, you know, it's gone a little puddly in places, which is great because, you know, you don't want everything to be perfect. But for this one here, I don't want the pink to go outside where I'm going to sponge. And now what we're doing is, this is why we needed to use a pattern stencil that had like a repeating pattern, because I've got my background, and now what I'll do is place the stencil over, but I'll place it over the top of where the colour was, and now the open parts here are where there's no colour, or, you know, not as much. Now these stencils, or this particular one, this diamond one, it's not a perfect diamond shape. It's got all these little rough bits. If you look closely at the stencil, if I bring that closer to the camera, you might see the design, how it's got little rough bits. It's meant to be like a grungy diamond shape. So you're not meant to get like a perfect diamond thing, or a diamond pattern, I should say. So now what I'm doing is just sponging on some picked raspberry. So I'm just going to go heavy here, sort of in the center, and then bring it out lighter again, just so I get a bit of graduation of color. And it's not all very dark pink. You just want a few little lighter areas and a bit of darker areas. And the good thing about stencils is they're very slippery. So these little ink blending tools will just glide over those stencils really easily. Okay, so you just want that to be nice and light. And then now you've got your crazy two-toned double stencil background, and all those little areas that are open, that's those, like those grungy areas of that stencil, and it just gives it a bit of white space as well, so it's not just, you know, green, blue and pink. You've actually got a little bit of that background showing through. So
Yeah,
that's what I
excellent,
like
Rachel.
about that.
Now, Marcus just said that she thought you'd put the stencil straight onto the cardstock, but I guess what you're showing us is a way to use both that positive and negative space in a stencil. So you can do it
Yes.
both ways.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So you can either just go straight on and sponge, or how I've done it is inked first and then pressed it on. So if you just want to, if you weren't sure how I did that, just at the end of when the video finishes, you can just rewind and just watch it as many times as you like, and then just give it a go with the stencils that you have. So I'm just going to sponge around the edges here just to give it a bit of a pinky edge. Now, the trick with sponging, if you've not done the edges like this before, is to start from the outside of your cardstock and have your blending tool on an angle. Instead of being straight up and down all the time and then going on, that's how you'll get your circle mark. So if you've just got it at an angle, it's only going to be the edge of the sponge that'll go through and sponge that edge there. So that's just bringing that pink out. Okie dokie. So what we want to do now is we want to start building up this onto a card, and I'm going to show you our new sentiment stamps. So our sentiment stamps are a long strip of sentiments in the one stamp. So and I've got these, they come as a single stamp, but I actually store them inside our storage cases. So you'll notice our stamp sets come in a storage case that you get with the stamp set. That's so you don't lose any of your stamps, and that they can sit up on your bookcase with the spine there, with the name and the number of each stamp set. And on our website, you can actually download the spine here for sentiment stamps or for any other stamp series that we have. I've got another one here that shows you the quote stamps as well. So then you can just write in here what the title is of the stamp set, and then you can just put them on your bookcase and you know where they are. So this is, yeah, it's a nice little storage idea. So then you don't lose your stamps, really. So I've got my sentiment stamps. You can fit 3 sentiment stamps in one case. So we'll get out this little celebrate one. So the 3 here that are inside this case, these are some new ones. That's the make art one, celebrate, and then dream big. The dream big one has been very, very popular. I'll just grab a little block here. And there we go. And now we've got blocks, stamping blocks that fit all of our stamp sizes as well. And I'm just going to use an archival jet black ink. I just want this to contrast against the background. And again, I'm just going on to mixed media cardstock. You don't need to, because the archival ink pad, that'll go onto basically any cardstock. But because I've got those little background little bits here showing through, I might as well match it with the same cardstock. So with these sentiment stamps, just some ideas with this. I'm actually stamping out the entire strip. But if you only wanted, you know, one sentiment, you can just get some Post-it notes and just mask it off and then stamp that one sentiment. So there's lots of different ways you can use them. You can actually cut them up if you want to as well, into separate sentiments. But because you can mask it off, then I probably wouldn't recommend it. I'd probably just leave it as one long strip, and then you can just, you know, use what you need. The other option is to also stamp this out and then just trim out what you need as well. So I'll just see if I'm pressing that correctly. There we go. And then you've got your little sentiment strip. So if you did only want, you know, 1 or 2 of those, you could actually stamp that out and then just trim out what you need. So then you just get 1 or 2 sentiments for those. So let me see here. I'll just grab some adhesive, and I'll just quickly stick this down on a card. I've just got some black ink on there, but that's no problem because it'll probably get covered up with the sentiment. So I'll just stick that on there. Okay, so then we've got our sentiment strip there, and I'm just going to stick that to the left-hand side of that card on that way. But what we'd like to do now is create some nice little flowers to go on the card. So these little flowers, I've pre-stamped those. Where's the stamp set? This is coming from our Fine Flowers stamp set. Now, this was designed by Stamping Matilda in Belgium. She hand drew all of these flowers, and some of these ones match some of her carved flowers, which is another stamp set.
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
They are. They're really nice, and there's a couple of different ways. I'll show you, once I show you this technique, I'll show you another technique on how you can use it. So we've got pre-stamped flowers. Now I've stamped it out here with the archival ink, and I've just trimmed them out so they're all ready to colour in. And I'm just going to get this Distressed Oxide ink again, just smush a little bit onto your craft mat. I'm also going to get the carved pumpkin colour, just so I've got a few different colours. And for fun, we'll also have a bit of squeezed lemonade. Whoops. And then I'm using a water brush. I'm just seeing if there's water coming out. Yeah, there's already water coming out. If your water brush, sometimes if they're not working so well, you can just get a water mister and just mist up your oxide inks. And now with the oxide inks, these ones, because they've got that dye pigment combination, it means they are a little bit more milky and a little bit more opaque than like a distress ink or something like that. So they will colour in quite solid, I guess, unless you actually add a lot of water. That's why I'm sort of running this brush through this water just to make, or through the ink, so I get lots of water in that ink. And then you can simply colour in your flower. Now, I'm not going to be very neat because I think watercolour should be a little bit messy. I'm just going to blend in some of that carved pumpkin as well. So with watercolour, you want it to just be a splash of colour, really, instead of being perfectly, you know, coloured in. That's the beauty of watercolour. You can make it look really arty when you're really messy. That's why I like the technique. Okay, so you can see how easy that was and how little ink I had. So if you wanted to use up all that ink, you'd need to stamp out a lot of flowers. But that's not a bad way to spend an afternoon.
Certainly isn't.
Especially if you didn't know what you wanted to do. Like if you're like, oh, I want to do something creative, but I don't know, I don't have the brain power to do a full project, or, I don't know where do I get my inspiration from today or something. Seriously, just go and grab a stamp that you have that can be coloured in like this, stamp out a whole stack of them for no reason other than to just sit down and do something creative, and then just colour them all in. And then, trim them out while you're watching a TV show or something. And then when you're ready to make some cards or do an art journal page, you will have a whole stack of flowers or whatever it is that you're stamping and colouring ready to go. So there's my two little flowers there. So just going on from what I was just saying then with pre-stamping some stuff, I've got a little container here. If you can see this, this is my pre-stamped stuff. So, I mean, I come home from demos and shows and classes and stuff with a whole stack of pre-stamped stuff. I can see there's a whole stack of compasses here. There's flowers here that I've trimmed. And so what I'll do is I'll trim them all out when, I've got a few spare minutes. And then I've got a whole basket here full of stamped images. Some aren't coloured, some are just stamped and cut out. And so when I need something for a card, often I'll just run to this little bucket of goodies and just see if there's anything. That's one of our flower film strip stamps, and I'll just see if there's anything here that can be used for my project. So that's a really good thing too if you want to do something creative without finishing a project. So, and this has got, well, this is nice. This is like a little, that's been embossed, so you might be able to see that little shimmer. So especially if you're just trying out stamps and you just want to see how they stamp, just always keep them and make your own little bucket. Okay, there's my little flowers. So I've got more ink here that I need. So again, I'm just going to grab this little crinkle ribbon. I had some leftovers of that. I might as well just, actually I need some more water on that. That's not going to pick up enough. But again, you can just get your paper towel and wipe it away, but why waste ink? Don't waste the ink, because you never know when you'll need a nice little rainbow ribbon. And you can see it mops it up pretty quickly and easily as well. And you get some really cool effects on your ribbon piece. Okay, that's pretty much it. I'll just set that aside to dry, and then that'll be ready for another card. Now I just need my towel here. I'll just wipe off any excess here. And my little flowers, again, they're a little bit damp still. You can get a heat tool, but you can also just pat them dry. But notice when you pat them dry, it'll take away some of that wet ink. So now it's a lighter version. So just when you do them at home, just you can either let them air dry or heat dry, or just pat them dry if you're in a rush. So there's our little flowers. And we can just stick those onto our card. This is all turning out very nice and pretty, isn't it? It all depends on the colours you use. So you can stick that down there, and then you can just stick this. I would use like adhesive foam to put that onto the card there, and then you've got your finished card. But I'll do that later, so you guys don't have to sit there and watch that. But now you can see how you've got a really nice card. And these ones here, I mean, you can raise them above the sentiment stamp as well. They don't have to sit underneath. You can sit them on top and underneath as well. You could use butterflies, you could use, anything basically. There's some other flowers here that would work really well. This is one of our new stamps. This is our new Warm Wishes flower stamp. So if you just use that long stem and stamped it up the side or underneath, actually I was playing around with one earlier. This is one, I haven't finished this card here, but I'll show it to you. So that is actually the same technique, different colors, but using the large diamond stencil. So you get a larger design in the background rather than that small, delicate diamond. So you can see the two different ways you can do it, just depending on which stencil that you use. And this one here, I only used a little bit of the sentiment stamp, not the whole bit. And also it just went straight onto the background rather than using a different piece. And I don't know if you can see there in the light, I've got a bit of shimmer there on the flowers. that's using some stickles. So this one's the eucalyptus one. And I'll just put some here. I've got some here. This is frosted lace. So if you want to add some of that to your flowers, and you just need to basically trace out a little bit of this one here. I'll just trace out a little bit from the center stem and just let that dry. And then that'll just give you a little bit of shimmer or glimmer or glitter on your flowers. So there's lots of different ways that you can just, enhance things.
Yeah. So Rachel, we've got a question from Kathy. She was just wondering why you've used the Distressed Oxide inks rather than the Distressed inks.
No reason other than that's what I felt like using. You could do the exact same thing with Distress inks. If you wanted me to do that, I'm happy to do that. I can show you. I don't know if we've got time. Do we have time for me to do that?
We've got as much time as you've got, Rachel.
Much time as we have. Okay, let me grab out. Okay, so here's my little Distress inks in the little tins. I'll do that so you don't have a glare on there, but I have them in little tins. So let's get out the same colours. Now I used picked raspberry. That's in this one. Picked raspberry. So what these ones will just be a bit sort of like darker in colour, like bolder in colour, more so than the oxide ink. But you can use any water-based ink. Sorry, I'm looking for the blues and the greens. Okay, I need cracked pistachio. And the other one was broken china. I can use any colours, but I might as well use the same ones, and because then we're comparing the same inks with the same inks.
Mm-hmm.
I'll set that one aside to dry because it's got the little stickles on there. Okay, so I'm not using the spray. This is just going to be the Distress ink going straight onto the stencil. So you just need to press down onto your stencil. Make sure you've got lots of ink. And if you're doing it this way where you're pressing onto your stencil, you want to make sure that you're using the lightest colour first. These two are fairly similar, but I kind of think that cracked pistachio is probably a little bit lighter than the broken china. And the reason you want to start with the lightest one first is when I now go on with broken china, and I'm not going to go like straight flat on, I'm sort of going to tap it, if that makes sense. Can you see there where I'm not putting the whole ink pad down? And I'm not covering the whole thing. I still want some of that cracked to show through. So a little bit of broken china. And you'll notice that that's not as wet as the spray because I used the spray in the beginning. So this is just ink pad straight onto this background. I'll just get another sheet of cardstock to use. So that means we'll need to add a little bit more water to our stencil. So I'll just spritz this. And because Distress ink is a translucent ink where Distressed Oxide ink is a little bit more opaque because it has that pigment in it, it will look a little bit different. Okay, and lift that up. Yeah, so you can see there how this one's a little bit lighter. It's kind of similar, but it's just a little bit lighter because of that lack of pigment. But and if you use darker colours, again, I could do the same thing, but using like a really dark colour. And I'm kind of getting the urge to do that. So
oh no, you started. No, we can't stop it.
I know. But look how nice that is. Like as light as it is. I don't know. Can you see that?
Yes,
too much on screen, but it's just really nice and pastel. So I need a different foam. So that's my oxide foam. Now I keep all my little foams in the back end of my little mini ink pads, so they're good to go. And we'll place this down here. So this will be a little bit darker than the blue and green purely because I'm not adding water to it to make it spread out or blend out. And so any water-based ink will work really well. So if you've got the Wendy Vecchi blendable ink pads, they'll work really well with this technique. just, yeah, any other water-based ink. You can do the blending with any other ink, but just that first part where you add water, so because you do need it to be reactive with water. So there you've got, so see how that picked raspberry was a little bit darker than that background. And then here's the one with the oxides. So there's the oxides. That's the distress. So the picked raspberry is almost the same because you're just blending the same way. But because the oxide had, well, it was also a spray, so you're not really comparing oxide ink pad with distress ink pad, but the oxide pads does have that opaque pigment in there, or semi-opaque. It's not completely opaque, but whereas this one's a little bit more blended out. So there's your other tip. But if you went really dark, let's go really dark. Okay, because they are pretty light colours, and I'll just do this real quick. Okay, we've got wilted violet. See, already you know you're going to get something crazy. And purple and
digging out their distressed inks this afternoon and making some backgrounds.
I hope so. I want to see them all too. So
yeah,
make sure you load them up in the group. So yeah,
if you have made anything that you want to share, we've got the Papercraft Posse group, which is the group for picture to page, where you can come and share all of your creations, and we can see what you've been up to.
All right. So let's mist this one with water. And again, how much water you use is entirely up to you. I'll show you, actually, that reminds me, I'll show you a little trick if you're finding that you didn't add enough water or it's not blending as much as what you thought it was going to be. Then I'll show you how you can fix it without, you know, throwing away your little background, because there's no point throwing away stuff. You might as well see how you can go. Oh, look at that. See, I could sit here and play all afternoon doing this. So what I'd like to show you. I know. So see this little area here where not much ink went on. I mean, I wouldn't worry about that, because to me that's just a part of the background. It makes it, you know, nice and interesting. But you can get your water brush, because distress ink's always reactive with water. Well, I've got still a little bit of pink on there, but that's okay. And then you can just bring out that colour and blend that out if you wanted to make that background a little bit more, I don't know, blended, I guess. But because most of my background's blended, I always like having a little bit that's not so perfect, because it just shows you that it's a handmade background. That's really nice. Those colours, wilted violet and blueprint sketch, they blend together really nicely. So that was just a darker version rather than using cracked pistachio and broken china. So again, like I said, you could sit here all afternoon and just make backgrounds, and then keep those backgrounds already done for when you want to make a card or a journal page or something like that. Okie doke. So now I just want to show you how I've used it in a journal page, and then I think we're going to wrap up and let you guys go off and create some fun stuff. So
yeah, and we've got a couple of questions, so we'll get to those in a minute. We'll just see your journals first.
Okay, yep, sure. See, look how nice that is. Yum. Okay. Okay, so this is not a finished journal page, but whoops. When things go everywhere. So you can see here how I use that same technique. This was using the large diamond stencil and using some really light sort of muted colours. So this was ice spruce and bundled sage for the background there. And then sponged through it is actually tattered rose. So that's a really soft, sort of like pinky, yellowy sort of a colour. And this is one of our new quote stamps as well. So you can just build up your journal pages or the backgrounds like that. Now, this journal page here is done in a similar way, but using a stencil with a two-tone background technique, but that's with gel printing. So printing the stencil, because you know how you can put the stencil on and then wipe away some of the paint. And I mean, there's lots of ways to show you that, but so printed first with the orange and then over printed then with the green. So, and there is a video actually on my YouTube channel, or the Darkroom Door YouTube channel, that actually shows how to do that. So you can check out how to do that technique. So that's just another few ideas there using the different ways to do the stenciling. And before we do go, there was one thing I was going to show you with those little fine flowers, because first off I had them stamped out in the black and I coloured them in.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can also do is ink them up with Distressed Oxide or Distress ink and actually stamp them out already in a watercolory way. So there's lots of different ways you can use those flowers.
Lovely.
So let me just put all this here together and just to give you a little recap on what we did. So yeah, the techniques was just that double stenciling. So you've got your two colours, and then using your leftover ink to create your ribbons. Don't forget to do that. You don't want to waste your ink. And then using the inks as well to colour in any sort of open stamping. And then that one there is using it with the stickles. So there we go. Hopefully that has given you some ideas on how to use it all into your projects.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll give Rachel a moment to turn her camera around. And what a great way to look at using both those positive and negative parts of your stencil. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to see. We are expecting to see the reverse that we actually get, so it's a good chance to have a play with them and see how they both work. So, excellent. Thanks, Rachel. Okay, now we had a couple of questions.
Yep.
Both Wendy and Skiva were asking about the seam binding. What is it and where did you get it?
Oh, okay. Seam binding. That one. This one is actually a Tim Holtz satin. I think he calls it crinkle ribbon,
Mm-hmm.
but the official term really is satin seam binding. So you should be able to pick it up from a fabric store or check out craft retailers. I think craftqueen.com.au sell this as well. So, and you can get it in different colors already pre-done,
Mm-hmm.
but I like to get the white and then you can color it up in any color that you want.
Yeah, excellent. Now we just had a few questions about which was light and dark, so perhaps go back and watch the replay and then you'll understand that Rachel
Yep.
actually used two different types of ink. So that's why they looked a little bit different. And then the sprays were similar ink but in a different medium again. So for
Yes,
those of you that are new to that range, it might be worth just to go back and look and understand the difference between the oxides in the sprays, in the pads, and then the distressed inks as well.
exactly. And you'll get completely different effects with every background that you do, even if you're using the same ink all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on how much ink you've put onto your stencil or onto your blending foam and how heavy you are in blending. But that's the fun of it. It just means that every background will be unique.
Yeah. And do you find that the cardstock makes much of a difference?
For that technique, it kind of does, yes. So that's why I like using the Distress mixed media, because it takes those inks really well and keeps them really vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're finding that you're not getting that vibrancy, maybe the cardstock is really porous and it's all seeping in. So try a different cardstock, or maybe you've got one that isn't porous at all, like a glossy cardstock. It can still work on gloss, but sometimes it'll slide a bit because it's a bit slippery.
Yeah.
So just test out what you have, and that way you'll learn about your cardstocks and which one work really well with those ink pads.
Yeah. And have you used the Distress on gloss so it will dry?
Yes, especially with if you use a lighter, like not too wet, but it does actually dry. So I've done a lot. Let me think. I might have a card here, but I've done a lot where you can pick up, like how it's colouring the flowers.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that if you stamp first onto gloss
Oh, okay.
and then colour the image in with your distress ink or whatever. That works great.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I don't think we've got any more questions, but like we said, if you do, pop them in the comments, and I'm sure Rachel will be along to answer them, or I will.
Yep, for sure.
And fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rachel.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for
Thanks,
having
bye.
me. Have a good day,
Excellent.
guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us, crafters. And like we said, if you do have any other questions, pop them in the comments and Rachel and I will definitely get to them. Any other questions, just like we said, go back and look at them, understanding the difference between your positives and your negatives in your stencils. understanding the differences in the inks. And I just love how Rachel just suggests, like we said, if we want to do something crafty but it's a bit overwhelming, let's just do some stamping, do a bit of colouring in, just to have those there. And what a gorgeous basket of things that Rachel had to play with. Didn't we all just wish we could dive in and have some ideas straight away? So I hope you've enjoyed our P2PCrafts presents Rachel and Darkroom Doors today. Like we said, head over to our website. Make sure you're on our emailing list. Continue to give us lots of love and comments and share us with your crafty friends. And we will look forward to seeing you again. So this is Michelle Brown signing off. We hope you have a crafty day.